Welcome to episode 13 of Rabbit Hole Reviews. We're going to take a quick look at the FM-90, which is an Argentinian licensed copy of in this case, a Browning Mark II high power. So the story of the FM-90 actually starts in the 1960s. So in the 1960s, Argentina took a look at the kind of small arms that they were issuing to their military, whether it be submachine guns, pistols, rifles, and they made a bunch of really solid choices back then. One of them was the FN-FNAL, so they made a license-produced copy of that from Browning or FM. And of course, those are available in the U.S. They're not that common. I wish I had one of those to review. Maybe I can fix that in the future. And they also made a license-produced copy of the Browning high power, and that's where something like the FM-90 comes in. So in the 1960s, 1969 to be exact, Argentina set up a factory in Rosario in Argentina. This town, actually, in the course of my research, I found out that Rosario was the birthplace of Che Guevara. So I think a lot of people assume that Che Guevara was Cuban, but he actually was Argentinian by birth. And so Rosario is Che Guevara's birthplace. Also, the hometown for the small arms plant that made this gun here. So the FM-90, as the name kind of indicates, was started to be exported or imported in the United States in 1990. I don't remember seeing these back then, but I probably wasn't looking for Argentinian high powers. I did have a Browning at that time. And so this ended up being a replacement for the Browning I no longer have. So it's interesting how Argentinian small arms kind of found their way into the U.S. market. One of the catalysts for that was the 1982 Falklands War. So in 1982, the then dictator of Argentina, Leopoldo Galtieri, tried to get some public support for his regime, and he thought the way to do that was to invade the Las Malvinas, a claim on an island chain that Argentina had for a while. But it was British territory, right? So they invaded and occupied the Falklands in 1982. The British, of course, were having none of it, and they responded with a task force. They defeated the Argentinians, I would say pretty decisively. And with the defeat in the Falklands War, the Galtieri regime was no more. That regime fell because what he was going for actually went the exact opposite way he thought it was going to go. Anyway, moving on. So the economic conditions in Argentina at the time went from bad to worse. They needed cash. And so one of the ways they did that was to export small arms that they'd been producing for, at this point, quite a while. And so things like the FM-90 were marketed and exported into the U.S. And I wish these were still around. It's probably not in production at this point, but if it is, I wish we have a more influx of Argentinian weapons. We do have Argentinian weapons. I mean, Bersa is an Argentinian company, and they've been bringing guns to the U.S. for years. I've had several Bersas. We're going to review a Bersa down the line. But not to get off into the weeds about Argentinian small arms, we'll just focus on the FM-90, which is 100% worth its own video, and that's why we're going to do it now. Everything about this pistol, in my opinion, is as good as a Browning high power. The fit, finish, feel, accuracy, reliability, it's indistinguishable except for the roll mark from a Browning. If I had my Browning today and I put it neck and neck, I really wouldn't be able to tell the difference. They both had that baked on enamel finish, which I really like. We'll take a closer look at it in a bit. And one way you can tell a Browning high power from an Argentinian high power at a distance is these Pockmeyer style grips. You see here, they have like these, they're almost like let's just call them like a Gen 4 or a Gen 3 Glock finger grooves, because it's an acquired taste. Some people don't like that. I actually had swapped these grips to aftermarket grips at one point, and I took them off because these grips, if you don't mind the aesthetic look of it, they're actually superior to just panel grips. It really gives you a good purchase on the gun. And this is, keep in mind, the Browning High Power already is a very ergonomic handgun. It fits in your hand anyway, like a glove. But these grips make it even better. So, and I wanted to keep it correct to how it was imported. So I put them back on, and I'm happy with it. I'm going to level 2 criticisms. I'll get that out of the way in the first 5 minutes of this video. One of them is a lesser criticism because it's inherent to the design. If you notice, Browning High Powers or clones have a magazine disconnect, right? So I take the magazine out, weapon is on fire. We'll go ahead and check clear, but it wouldn't fire anyway, even if there was a round in the chamber, right? So dead trigger without a magazine. I guess it's, I don't know how fair it is of me to criticize a magazine disconnect when, one, you can bypass that feature if you don't like it, and two, it's inherently part of the design going back to 1935. It's always been there. So, you buy this kind of gun and you know that that's part of it. So you know beforehand. So you really can't criticize something that you were already aware of. But what I don't like, and again, this is also part of the period design of this gun. This is a Mark II spec, is this safety, okay? All right, well, the one word I'll use to describe this safety, I'm going to say it's horrendous, right? Because number one, it's not audible and tactile, which is, you can forgive that. But what is terrible about this safety is that to take it from safe to fire, you have to make a deliberate effort to find it and push it down because there's almost nothing to really grab onto here. Your thumb's not going to rest on it. Your thumb is going to have to find it, and you're not going to be able to deactivate it with the meaty part of your thumb either. It's going to be probably below the joint. I think under duress or in darkness, or if you're injured or whatever, I think you're going to miss that safety. It's very easy to draw this pistol and have it on fire, and since it's not audible or tactile, there's no way to really feel that you've disengaged it. There's no click, no nothing. So if you go there and you sweep it and you miss that, if your hands are bloody or sweaty or you're freaking out, you're going to miss that. And it hits it right below the inside of the joint on the thumb. So, and it's funny because that's really the only part of this pistol's controls that are I mean, it's terrible, right? But the magazine release is perfect. It's raised up, it's nice, no problems finding it. Even with these Pockmeyer style grips, this slide release, it almost feels like it's extended, like it's custom, but it's not. It's a stock slide release. But on that safety, they just didn't think, and of course it was changed in later Marks. The Mark III doesn't have this safety. Most Brownings don't have this for the most part that I've seen. You're going to see the Mark III variant for the most part. But as a collector's item and as a shooter, it's less of an issue, right? If you're at the range. But for a concealed carry piece or for a bedside gun, this is definitely an issue for me. So that's my only real criticism. Could you swap out that safety? I'm sure you could, but it comes this way, and then now it's added expense and hassle and everything else. And I'm going to leave it as is, right? So this gun has been relegated to range duty and as a collectible. Concealed carry, yes, you could do it, right? It's 13+1. You could get magazines that hold more rounds. I think they have aftermarket mags that hold higher capacity, but it is over 2 pounds in weight. We'll get into the specs here in a minute. Single action is great. I mean, it's a mil-spec style trigger, kind of gritty, kind of heavy, but not terrible. Bedside gun, I'd have to probably carry this without a round in the chamber because that safety is so vague. Because if I have it cock and lock and round in the chamber and I have that safety engaged, it's going to be kind of mushy. So I'd probably have to carry it not condition 1, right? I'd have to have it where there's no magazine or no round in the chamber. So again, you have other handguns that you don't have to worry about that issue, then you're going to have those as a bedside gun. And at least that's my philosophy. Some of the specs, of course I don't have specs specific to the FM-90, but since it's an identical copy to a high power, I'm going to use the high power's numbers because, well, they're identical. It's a recoil operated single action auto-loading pistol. In this case, 9x19 9mm Luger. Magazine capacity is 13+1. Has a barrel length of 4 5/8 inches. Has a sight radius of 6.5 inches. Overall length is 7 3/4 inches. The weight is just over 2 pounds. And the finish was either a high polished blued or in this case, a matte black enamel baked on finish. And I actually prefer this finish. The Browning that I had way back when in the 90s was just the same kind of finish. It was a Mark III matte enamel, identical to this except for the grips and the roll mark. So let's go ahead and put it on the scale. We'll test the loaded weight, unloaded weight. We'll get the trigger pull out of the way. And we'll see what we're working with. Hopefully the scale will cooperate. Likes to change the unit of measurements. I don't know why. All right, so it calibrates itself, I guess. We'll go ahead and put an empty magazine in there with the weapon on safe. So 34, sometimes I don't trust these, right? 34.43 ounces, and of course if you carried it 13 plus 1, you're looking at, we'll just say 35 ounces, 34.85. So that's to be expected. There's no surprise as far as the weight's concerned. Now, you know, I did this out of order. I'm going to have to, well, I'm not going to reshoot the video, right? But I weighed the first weight with an empty magazine and 1 round. So just ignore that. We're going to have to reweigh it here in a second. 39.72 ounces with a 13 round magazine loaded. If you add 1 round, you're looking at just over 40 ounces. And the empty weight, again, we'll go ahead and do that. So just over 40 ounces for the loaded weight. Empty weight with an empty magazine is going to be, oh, I gotta change the measurement. 34.5 ounces. So 34.5 ounces empty and roughly 40 ounces loaded with a 13 round magazine plus 1. So 14 rounds total. So those are your total numbers. I kind of went and did that in a roundabout way. Let's go ahead and do the trigger pulls while we're here. Show that it is clear. Notice I have to have a magazine in the well because otherwise I have a dead trigger. So let's see what it's going to be. I won't make any predictions on the trigger weights. £7.8 pounds. £7, and one final time. Yeah, I mean it's definitely a mil spec style trigger, but it doesn't feel bad. It really, yeah, it's heavy and it could be described as gritty. 7.4 pounds, so between 7 and 7.5 pounds. It's mil spec. Could you do a trigger job? Absolutely. Would I bother? Not really. I think this gun is perfect in the configuration that it's in. It does have a ring hammer, which is nice. So if you're worried about hammer bite, if you've got fleshy hands, I've never been bitten by this hammer. But you had 2 different styles of hammer, of course, and this is the ring style, which I like. Overall, just a really nice gun. Not much to really criticize about it. The one selling point is if you look at the current prices of either Mark III Brownings, which were discontinued in 2018, and even the new issued one that came out earlier this year, which in a lot of ways is considerably redesigned. I won't really compare those two because there's definitely some changes that were made. But it is a testament to FN's view of this gun. We're talking about almost a 90-year-old design. And FN thought highly enough of it to, after they discontinued the original Mark of high power, to invest the time, money, and energy in marketing to take a 90-year-old design and refresh it. So that really, I think, speaks to the overall success of this firearm being proliferated for, well, since 1935. Civilian use, military use. For the longest time, the Browning high power was the Wonder 9 for decades. There really weren't too many competitors. I mean, it was used by, the British in the Falklands. It was used by even the Waffen SS had a version of this, because obviously when they invaded Belgium, they kept FN kept making these under, I wouldn't say under the gun of the Germans, but let's just say the Germans forced them to make them, right? This is just such an iconic design. And again, what makes this gun attractive is that I paid roughly $600 out the door for this gun. Well, it was pre-pandemic, so 2019 timeframe. What can you get these for now? I haven't really searched online. You're not going to find them as, oddly enough, they're not as common as Brownings as you could expect that. But if you find a nice clean one and you can get it inexpensive, it is identical to a Browning high power, like a Mark III, Mark II era high power in every way, but without the price tag. Even older Brownings, they're all expensive. I've seen Browning high powers sell for thousands of dollars at this point, which to me is crazy. They made millions of these things in different marks, and they had different licensed producers. Someone paying over $2,000 for Browning high power, I think that's crazy. But to each his own. So to wrap this one up, get this gun if you like Browning high powers, because it in effect is, in my view, a Belgian produced. It's just under license in Argentina for probably half or a third of the price, and you're getting every bit as good a quality. And as a concealed carry, I would either opt for a later one that has an upgraded safety, or even the new one if you don't mind spending the money. The reliability and accuracy on these is great. There's no issues there. If you don't mind the weight, especially in the older marks, it's all steel, so you're looking at 40 ounces loaded with 14 rounds. If you don't mind that, these are excellent handguns. But for me, like I was saying earlier, it's a collectible item, less so because it's not as collectible as a Browning. And then ultimately it boils down to just being a shooter for me, and just to have an example of a high power and not want to have to break the bank. So that's been my review of the Argentinian FM-90, a licensed copy of a Mark II spec Browning high power.